Well, then let's get to our top story, which is what is going on in Ukraine. And the plot thickens. And the words, "it's over," are being thrown around over the past 48 hours. Those are the words being told to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky about this war. It's over. It's over. It's over. It's over. While at the same time, the United States is openly admitting that we are actively attacking Russia, using Ukrainians as cannon fodder to do it. So this is confirmed by the CIA, confirmed by Ukraine. We'll get into all of that in a moment. But just a few minutes ago, we just got confirmation. We just learned that Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen arrived in Kyiv and paid a surprise visit. She brings her checkbook there. Look at her giant checkbook under her arm. That is the Treasury Secretary of the United States posing for pictures, flying in and surprising Zelensky. Of course, this comes on the heels of President Biden showing up there last week under the dark of night. And so she's there to cut him a big blank check.
You would only assume. I mean, her job is to make sure there is enough money based on a Federal Reserve system.
Right.
And she's been warning us that we are at the brink of collapse if Congress does not pass a new budget.
A new debt ceiling. Yeah, but she can go to Ukraine and hand out blank checks to...
And so she should be laser focused on avoiding a government shutdown.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, her harsh words about Congress and debt mean nothing if she's going somewhere else to issue checks.
Yeah, it's unbelievable to me. I mean, literally, the optics on all of this, when East Palestine, Ohio, when you have people with now coming out with like all kinds of bronchitis issues, 44,000 animals killed, confirmed killed as a result of this chemical, I'm going to call it a chemical attack in Ohio. And then you have President Biden leaving. You have Anthony Blinken leaving. You have Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen flying to Ukraine as well. Like, where are our priorities? They're right there. They're right there in front of your eyes. So then you have this. According to reports, German and French leaders quietly met with Zelensky this week and told him that Ukraine will not win the war and should negotiate a settlement with Russia. But the U.S. is actively pushing for more weapons and a new escalation with Russia and China. So what the hell is actually going on here? There's a lot of weird timing of a lot of things, and we want to kind of unpack this. All the timing of these reports really smells fishy to me. On the surface, of course, Ukraine lost the war about a year ago, so this is not news. We knew from the moment this started that this was over, and everything that's happening now is just cleanup. And as Colonel Douglas McGregor said on our show, the only thing left is people being basically thrown into the meat grinder as cannon fodder. And we now know that this is confirmation of this. Newsweek publishing this report out of Bakhmut saying the life expectancy near the front line for Ukrainian soldiers is 4 hours. The life expectancy near 4 hours on the front lines of this war.
Is that what people mean when they put a Ukrainian flag in their
I don't know.
profile, that it's okay for these people to die in pursuit of an ideology?
Or the people, and we're going to cover this a little bit later, Dan Cohen's going to be joining us, this pro-war protest in Washington, D.C. this weekend, where a few hundred people showed up and they went to protest, and they even went to the Russian embassy and were chanting, more weapons, more weapons, more weapons. Okay, so that's what this looks like. 4 hours is the life expectancy of a person that shows up on the front lines and is killed. And the guy even said, he said, sometimes it's a little bit longer. Like, 5 hours?
That's nice.
4 or 5 hours is how long you're going to live now showing up on the front lines against this machine. Unbelievable. And the U.S. is using Ukrainians to be killed in this proxy war. I mean, make no mistake about it. Our friend of the show, Lucas Gage, who's been on here, this is exactly what he said in a video that he published a few weeks ago. And you seek him out on Twitter. He's a good friend of the show. Former Marine, said, you are being used. You are being used, Ukrainians, as cannon fodder to die in this war. That's all that's happening right now.
And it's not coincidence. If you read your newsletter this morning, the Wall Street Journal published reports showing that the West has shipped 38% more oil to Europe during the conflicts in the last year since the conflict began. And so it's a big boom to the U.S. oil industry, which was lagging in sort of popularity and clout And so, of course, it makes sense. It stands to reason that the West would continue to support this war while it continues to profiteer from said war.
Right.
And, we can sort of say, oh, well, we must stop Putin. That's the reason. So these deaths are justified in pursuit of what? While our country, while the dollar does continue to rise. So
I did mention Lucas Gage. Maybe I'll just play it here if we can. I don't know if I can get the audio.
Like you claim you do, that if you really care about the Ukrainian people like you claim you do, then listen to me very carefully. My name is Lucas Gage. I served 2 tours in Iraq. I put it in quotes because who did I serve? The special interest who wanted war. How did they get that war? They lied to us. They said Saddam had weapons of mass destruction and he was tied to 9/11. Both lies, and we all know it now. Years later, of course, after all the damage has been done. The same, I believe, is happening with the Ukrainians. The EU, NATO, the US, they don't give a damn about Ukraine. They're using it as a bulwark against Russia because they have an agenda to take out Vladimir Putin. And they're saying, look, the Ukrainians are winning the war. They're pushing here and they're pushing there. That's when Putin has his hands tied behind his back in a special operation, which is limited in nature.
So what he's saying is you're just being used. You're absolutely just being used in this war, and that's absolutely the case. So the U.S. is using Ukrainians to be killed in this proxy war, and now we have confirmation directly from both the head of our CIA, William Burns, this weekend, in an interview confirming what you're about to see in this report from a Ukrainian lieutenant general who says, well, yeah, the U.S. is providing us pinpoint accuracy in all of the attacks, which we've known for a year, right? We've known all that. But of course, now it's confirmed that we're literally using Ukrainians as cannon fodder and pinpointing exactly where to be attacking Russians, using them in this proxy war. Watch.
Some rare on-camera details. He talks about intelligence provided by the U.S., which has allowed Ukraine to destroy some key Russian targets in occupied parts of Ukraine. How significant is that?
I think it's really significant, Diane. So this was Lieutenant General Sergei Nayev. He's one of Ukraine's top 5 commanders in the country. He's in charge of all forces across northern Ukraine, close to that border with Belarus. We've had the warnings about possibly Russia launching an attack from there. The Washington Post broke this story from anonymous sources, but I think to have a top-ranking Ukrainian commander go on camera about this and be so explicit about the detail was quite illuminating. I mean, effectively, the Lieutenant General told me that Ukraine is getting real-time data exchanges with the Americans. The US is basically helping Ukraine to pinpoint targets. So the Ukrainians are the ones who are coming forward with the targets. They're saying, OK, we want to target, this is the target, say, an ammunition depot in Russian-occupied Ukraine in a certain area. They'll then go to the US, and the US is effectively, according to the Lieutenant General, pinpointing, giving them more accurate coordinates for them to then launch missiles using those US-supplied HIMARS, which we've been seeing.
Yeah, so what happens is, right, so then where those missiles are launched from, that spot gets destroyed. So those people who are there manning those particular units get destroyed. But the U.S. is happy to provide you with those coordinates to hit Russia. So the U.S. is using Ukraine to attack Russia. We've always known this, but we have this now top Ukrainian lieutenant general confirming this, and then the CIA, the head of the CIA, also confirming this. So this weekend, the mainstream media went on this like bender, feeding us this incredible diet of propaganda.
Yes.
It was unbelievable going through this weekend. Served up by the deep state. Without a doubt, this came right from the intelligence state. When I say deep state, what I mean is the permanent government. You know, like when Biden leaves, when Trump leaves, when Bush leaves, they're still there. They stay. That's the deep state.
It was almost like a graduation ceremony. Like, look, we got to 1 year of the war.
Right.
Great. Or like a wedding anniversary, like many happy returns.
Yeah. Here's what we've been able to do.
Look, we've been like Vladimir Zelensky. We've been loving you so long.
Right. Yeah, we've been together. I got you some flowers, and I got you another $10 billion is also what we gave them for the anniversary gift. Can you get that for me next year? The flowers. So this weekend, the mainstream media fed us a steady diet of this propaganda, and it was amazing coming, and specifically the deep state trying to push us into a direct conflict with Russia and China. Here's the front page of Drudge this afternoon. This is, by the way, you can say whatever you want about Drudge. I read it to see what the propaganda is by the deep state. Drudge is literally the most read news website in the whole world, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think those are the numbers, right, on the whatever ComScore numbers or whatever. The number one most read news website in the world. So however you feel about that, warning all of us that, hey, China better back off. That's what they're telling us right here in a number of different pieces they're linking to here, that China better back off. This the U.S. warns China, don't help Russia. And over the past week, the United States has been making baseless claims that China is joining the war in Ukraine.
When China went to the United Nations last week and said, we need peace, you're never going to achieve it by sending weapons.
Right. And there's zero evidence they've done so. In fact, the New York Times came out with a piece saying that, the Wall Street Journal came out with a piece saying, China is providing drones to Russia. And then at the end of the piece, they go through in detail and they basically explain, no, they're not, that they're actually, they manufacture pieces that then the UAE builds and is sending them through. Has nothing to do with China other than, China builds a lot of stuff. As Caitlin Johnstone points out, like the article was literally just about how China makes a lot of stuff.
I mean, you could make the same argument about, the Internet of Things, about anything, because I think, as Edward Snowden points out in his book, that somewhere between 60 and 80% of all connectivity hits through American servers. So you could say that the United States is doing the same thing.
But the United States runs the Internet.
Because most Internet connectivity that is now being used for defense or not defense, offense,
right,
it is also being run through the U.S. So the same propaganda can cut both ways.
So over the past week, the United States has been making all of these baseless claims, and this weekend they really ramped it up. And that China is sending lethal weapons into Russia, and that NATO needs to fight back on all of this. They're hoping that you'll believe this story. They're hoping that you're believing that China is on the offensive. They're trying to invade the United States with balloons. They are actively trying to help Russia against NATO. And last week, Secretary of State Blinken said, we're worried, that China is sending lethal weapons to Ukraine. And CBS News, once again, helps put any of this propaganda on television. You're going to see a steady diet of CBS stuff here in just a moment. Watch. This is Blinken pushing this total garbage line. Watch.
There is open source reporting that Chinese companies are providing surveillance equipment to that mercenary group, the Wagner group, fighting in Ukraine. Does the U.S. consider this to be providing military support to Russia?
We've been concerned from day one about that possibility. In fact, if you go back to the very first conversations that President Biden and President Xi had about Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, just a couple of weeks into the war, President Biden shared with President Xi our deep concern about the possibility China would provide lethal support to Russia in this effort.
So I also love the framing of that. She's like, there's a lot of there's independent reporting now. There's open source reporting, like whatever the hell that means. That now, in fact, we know that China is in fact trying to provide. They're thinking about it, trying to provide lethal weapons to Ukraine. Or to Russia. What do you think about that? That's how these reporters, you're going to see NBC, CBS, and ABC all funneling these questions to these guys. Like, here's your softball question.
Yeah. I think that this is an attempt to rile up the right that is starting to turn into the peace party until it comes to China, because the right has been critical of arming Ukraine.
Right.
And is starting to get louder. The left has always been this like party of peace, but not anymore. There's no peace in the left anymore. The right is starting to bubble up some signs of like, let's not drag this out into an expensive war. But as soon as you say China, you rile, and that became very apparent to me when now presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy has started to up his anti-China rhetoric in order to fit in with the right, which is confusing.
I know, because his whole book, whatever it was called, Woke Incorporated. And, he talks about a bunch of stuff in that, but he's really amplified on Twitter, like his anti-China rhetoric lately. And you see this, you're absolutely right. Like suddenly now you're seeing anybody who is like sort of anti-Ukraine war, you throw in the China mix. That's why this whole timing is so amazing.
Yes, because it's a dragnet.
Yeah.
Because anyone who wants to be critical of Russia, then it's sort of like, I I don't know. Yeah, it's a dragnet. It's like, oh, you're pro-peace against Russia. Let's drag you in with China. And that will bring your body temperature up. And now we've got a war.
Yeah.
Whereas we might not have before. And so I think that anyone who's on the left who thinks, who has just thrown in the towel on peace talks, like, oh, no, the left is no longer a party of peace. So forget them. But we can get the right if we throw in China, because the right is extremely afraid of China.
Yeah, and then you throw in, anytime these government agencies get on the same page, it's more propaganda. They're all saying the same thing. So all of these government agencies, they drag out a bunch of these people from the Biden administration and the former Bush administration to come on television. You go on the Sunday shows, and we're in for a heavy dose of propaganda this weekend. If you've watched for our show for any length of time, the warning signs when you're being gaslit, right? Gaslighting, of course, makes you question your own sanity, because you're sitting there thinking, because of the abuser, makes you think that you're crazy, right? So all of these government officials go on television telling us that China is our biggest threat and is joining the war in Ukraine. And oh my God, now if I was sitting on the fence about China, now I need to be scared, because they're actively coming for me. They're actively coming for me. And they're basically saying, you think I'd make this up? I'm the CIA director. You think I would make this up? And so they're gaslighting us, because we're sitting there going, well, man, they're all saying the same thing. Maybe they really know something.
Right.
Maybe they really have some sort of intelligence on this. I'm the head of the CIA. I'm more important than you. You think that I would make this up? Here's William Burns on CBS gaslighting you. Watch.
Thinking they're actively considering it. Mm-hmm. I mean, how confident are you in the intelligence that this is something Xi Jinping himself may change his mind about?
Well, we're confident that the Chinese leadership is considering the provision of lethal equipment. We also don't see that a final decision has been made yet, and we don't see evidence of actual shipments of lethal equipment. And that's why I think Secretary Blinken and the president have thought it important to make very clear what the consequences of that would be.
Yeah, so the consequences of that would be war, right? So we have intelligence that says that Xi is thinking about sending lethal weapons to Ukraine.
What intelligence gives us people's thoughts? Brain transparency?
But we know he's thinking it, but we also know he hasn't done it yet. So this is like our warning to you. Like, this is why we need to spend more money in Ukraine. This is why we need to really ramp up our shipments of weapons and money into a proxy war, because he's thinking about it. We also need to send more troops to Taiwan, which we did this week and announced, and open more military bases in the South China Sea, because he's thinking about it. This is, it's unbelievable. And we're supposed to believe that?
Well, I know we're not.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I know we're not suggesting that the CIA director, who you could kind of call like the head spy in the U.S., would be deceiving us.
No, of course not.
That is literally his job, as deception. That's like what they do.
And this is William. Yeah. Here's William Casey, the former CIA director. He says it perfectly. This is the former CIA director. We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false. From a former, that's from his first staff meeting in 1981. We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false. So William Burns, the head of the CIA, goes on CBS News, which is a mouthpiece of the intelligence state, and we're all sitting there over drinking our cups of coffee on Sunday morning supposed to believe that, because it's all the propaganda. So CBS...
We're supposed to get ourselves riled up. Oh, yes, China, existential threat.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So CBS literally has the head of the CIA on trying to get the truth about China and Russia. And then CBS is not alone in this. Another mouthpiece of the intelligence state, Andrea Mitchell from NBC News, giving another softball lead-in question about China. This is to the ambassador of the UN, Linda Thomas Greenfield. Here's my question to you. It's a lead-in softball question about how dangerous China is. Here you go. Here's your question. Watch.
What do you say to China now that China is considering weaponizing, rearming Russia? Wouldn't that be a game changer?
It certainly has been made clear to the Chinese, from President Biden to President Xi. Secretary Blinken made that clear to Wang Yi in Munich this past week that China should not get involved in this war in the sense of providing lethal weapons to the Russians. That it would be a game changer, and it would be something we would have serious concerns about.
Yeah.
What intelligence do they have that Russia is running out of weapons?
Or needs it, right? Like, we're literally hearing from Western leaders in the top of this piece we just talked about, telling Zelensky it's over. Like, you're done. And the destruction of their army is all but just, what's left is, again, the cleanup, right? So the mission is almost complete. And again, so what do you need? You need China to step in with what at this point? It makes no sense.
I don't know.
So then CNN, this is amazing. Watch CNN. So we have CBS, NBC, CNN, all on the same page with this propaganda over the past 24 hours. Here's CNN's Dana Bash asking another ridiculous softball, intelligence state prepared softball question of Jake Sullivan. Now, you remember, Jake Sullivan is one of the people Seymour Hersh highlights as responsible and involved in the Nord Stream pipeline story. So just watch this intro question.
How concerned, just kind of look at this big picture, how concerned are you about these two major U.S. adversaries working together on the battlefield in Ukraine, and what that means sort of more generally about the relationships here?
Well, look, the U.S. position in this conflict is straightforward. We're not going to stand by and allow one country to roll over another country and try to wipe it off the mat. And we're going to build and have built a coalition of more than 50 nations to resist that and help the Ukrainians defend their own territory. China's position in this is much more awkward. In fact, there was just a vote at the UN General Assembly in which China abstained. They did not vote with Russia. They were one of a number of countries that just tried to stand on the sidelines. When China talks rhetorically about the war in Ukraine, they tie themselves into knots.
Yeah. I love her question. How concerned are you about this massive threat of these two adversaries? They're an adversary.
To call for peace and say you cannot obtain peace with weapons is not rhetorical.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe if she had watched or read their statement from the United Nations next week, she could have asked a follow-up question that was relevant about what is rhetorical about saying weapons are not going to work to obtain peace and peace needs to happen immediately. No, they won't get that nuance. They've been handed scripting from this, their intelligence sources. And so they think that these intelligence sources that they have inside of Washington are like high level. They're being fed a crock of crap, of course, because they're on the take. And then in one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen on television, guys, I'm just curious. Let me know in the chat if you've ever seen anything like this, what I'm about to show you. I've never seen anything like this. CNN set up a town hall meeting with Ukrainian soldiers on the front line, the very same Ukrainian soldiers who we reported at the top of the show have a 4-hour lifespan now. And they did a question and answer session with our national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, in, I don't know, like some sort of armored vehicle. CNN somehow managed to get cameras and lights and do the whole thing and do a satellite feed connecting soldiers on the front line with Jake Sullivan, asking them about more ammunition, more weapons. Watch this.
Is U.S. government planning or considering launching the production of ammunition specially for Ukraine? I mean, 155 caliber shells, 120 caliber mines, and of course, HIMARS missiles. Do you consider this plan? And if your answer positive, could you please tell me when are you going to realize this? Thank you.
Well, first, Igor, before I answer the question, I just want to say that as you stand out on the front lines tonight, you're defending the freedom of your country, but as President Biden said in Warsaw 2 nights ago, you're defending freedom everywhere. And so I want to say thank you for your bravery, your courage, and for the men and women who are fighting with you. We are grateful for all that you do, the sacrifices that you are making.
For our
and we
proxy
can't
war.
even begin to imagine the difficulties and the trials that you've gone through.
Yeah, because we're doing this to you.
Is everything in our power.
I want to point out that it says that this is via Starlink, which said they weren't going to do this anymore. So way to go on that plan.
Yeah. So Elon Musk, what are you doing here? Your Starlink. They're using Starlink to be able to communicate via Starlink.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, we found out the reason they weren't going to do it is because it was easily targeted and they could hit. So you're just like opening these guys up to be attacked.
Right.
To get you the equipment and the ammunition that you need. And you mentioned 155 millimeter artillery shells, 120 millimeter tank shells, and other systems like the HIMARS missiles.
I mean, you're literally having you're having a Ukrainian soldier piece of propaganda from CNN asking our national security advisor for weapons and ammunition to be sent into a non-NATO country to provoke Russia.
Yeah.
I mean, this literally seeing propaganda in action. We're going to set up a town hall meeting. Like CNN didn't just randomly fall into this. They literally propagated propaganda.
As if he could send him something directly. And he's saying, like, when am I going to get it to me? Right.
Like, Igor, I'm going to get this to you this afternoon.
As if there's no chain of command. As if there's no, as if he could just be like, oh, I'll put it in the mail with some muffins tomorrow. It is just
we'll drop it from a balloon.
Right.
A Chinese balloon.
This is only meant to evoke an emotion from us. And it's working for me because I see this person. I don't want him to get hurt. It does, who knows where he is, but we are supposed to be attaching emotion to his life.
Right.
Which we do. But then we don't when we continue to say, oh, we'll give you some weapons to extend your life more than 4 hours.
Right. And the propaganda that you're defending freedom, though. Right. Defending freedom?
On behalf of us, on behalf of all of us.
Do you guys in America right now, if you're in the United States of America or any freedom loving country, do you feel safer or more free or more democratic because the United States is carrying out a proxy war in Ukraine and that Ukraine is fighting Russia? Do you feel more free?
It's a really inauthentic question, because if we were really going to see, like, what is someone who's fighting there for? Like, is my family safe? Why am I doing this? Those are authentic questions, not like, hey, I need 5 of these and 10 of these.
Can you send 150 millimeter? And like, these are pre-planned questions, right?
Sure.
Please ask him this because we want this is all, again, theater. And so sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, from a production standpoint, that's what I do. Looking at that quality of that video, that does not look like that's somebody that's out in the front lines via Starlink, because I've used Starlink. It's not that fast. And that's a clear signal that I'm able to send with a gig to you in Portugal. And that looked like crystal clear. Yeah. And there was no delay. I mean, it just looks like that person, like, they're not showing anything out around him. It's nice and tight. So that guy could be located in a satellite room somewhere in, the center of Ukraine. I don't buy, based on the quality, that dude is out on the front lines.
Well, neither do some of these tweets too. Camus here, I love this tweet, says, is there anything on CNN that isn't staged? Good question, Camus. Good question. Frosty says this in a tweet: wonder what it would have been like if American soldiers had a chance to question and answer the national security advisor like this. Right? I mean, this is a part of, like, American soldiers don't even get this kind of access to ask questions like this. Like, hey, I have a question. I'm over here live. I'm in Syria. Can you tell me why I'm in Syria? Did we declare war on Syria? Like, why the hell am I here stealing their oil? Mr. Security Advisor, can you answer me that question? Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
Or why don't we get some of the American soldiers who are in Ukraine right now? Want to get them on camera and ask questions. They're not supposed to be on camera because we're all to pretend that they're not even in Ukraine right now. Go ahead, Philip.
Well, it's the optics, because if you had an American soldier like talking to the National Security Advisor and they were saying we need more weapons, then that makes us look weak. But if we have somebody that we're defending by sending them democracy and weapons and they look weak, then that is the play of, like, look how strong we are. We're upholding these people. So that's why you would never see that, because it's all the optics of it. Like, they need this kind of Q&A, because then it just shows, like, well, look how important it is. These people need more bullets, and we're the ones to give it to them. yay freedom.
That's a great point about how it sets up the authority. Yeah.
Yeah. And the deep state really wants a full-scale war here. They even dragged it out. They even dragged out neocon Condoleezza Rice out of her war coffin this weekend to praise President Biden's policy in Ukraine. So he's doing a great job. Like, Condoleezza Rice is praising Biden. She says, but we should be sending some more weapons. It's not happening as fast as I would like. And then you had Mike McCall also being dragged out. He said, it's going good. It's going good. But we should send them F-16s. So we need to send them jet aircraft now. That's the next stage in all of this. So Putin responded to all of this theatrics and said, quote, the more long-range Western systems are being delivered to Ukraine, the farther we will be forced to move the threat from our borders, end quote. Like, that's how Putin's saying, like, okay, you keep sending this stuff. We will continue to push that threat further and further away from our borders. And now we learned those HIMARS that we sent them, they're out of range now. They can't hit Russia. They can't hit these soldiers anymore. They've been pushed so far back that the only thing we can do now is send them longer range weapons. So that's the next question. What are they going to do? Are we going to send jets? Are we going to send longer range missiles now to Ukraine? Because the high-tech HIMARS systems that they've sent are now useless. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.